Hello, everybody, and welcome to Theology 101. Today we are going to look at the book of 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel is the 10th book of the Hebrew Bible and the 4th book of the former prophets. The former prophets consist of 4 historical books: Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. 1st and 2nd Samuel were not originally divided into 2 books, but were one. However, the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of the Old Testament from the 3rd century BC, separated the book of Samuel into 2 books, which is why we have 1st and 2nd Samuel today. 1st and 2nd Samuel gets its name from the prophet Samuel, who helped transition Israel from the time of the judges to the time of the kings. Samuel is the main character in 1st Samuel, while 2nd Samuel focuses on King David. The theme of the relationship between kingship and covenant connects the narratives of 1st and 2nd Samuel. When Israel requested a king, they were also dismissing their covenant relationship with God. When Samuel instituted the office of king within Israel, he did so with the concept of God's covenant. Saul obviously failed to live up to God's covenant, while David did. David was an imperfect but true representation of a picture of a king living under God's covenant, which ultimately points to Jesus, who is the perfect picture of a covenantal king. With this purpose in mind, let me give you an overview of 2 Samuel. The book continues the narrative from 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel ended with the death of Saul and Jonathan. The news reaches David, and he mourns the death of Saul and Jonathan. After Saul's death, God instructs David to go to Hebron, where the tribe of Judah lives, so that he can be anointed as king. Although David became king over Judah, the other tribes did not recognize David as king. Instead, they saw Ishbosheth, Saul's son who survived the battle with the Philistine, as Saul's successor. Conflict quickly broke out between David's men, led by Joab, and Ishbosheth's men, led by Abner. In this conflict, Asahel, Joab's brother, was killed by Abner. As David's political power began to grow, Abner shifted his allegiance from Ishbosheth to David. Joab, however, remembered that Abner killed his brother, so he avenges his brother's death by murdering Abner. After Ishbosheth's death, David was made king over all the tribes of Israel. One of his first acts as king was to capture the fortress of Zion from the Jebusites. Then David established Zion, also known as Jerusalem, as the capital of Israel, and built a palace there as his new home. Recognizing the importance of the Ark of the Covenant as a symbol of God's presence, David determined to bring it to Jerusalem from Kiriath-Jearim, where it was previously stored. Soon after moving into his palace, David wanted to build a temple for God to house the Ark of the Covenant because he did not think it was right for him to live in a nicer place than God. God told David that he will not be the one to build the temple, but that God would build a royal dynasty through him that will last forever. This royal line will be realized through a promised offspring who will come from the tribe of Judah, who we later know to be Jesus, who was called the son of David in Matthew chapter 1, verse 1. Then God concludes by stating that Solomon, and not David, will be the one to build God's temple. David's reign is marked by many military victories that resulted in him expanding Israel's border and establishing a time of prosperity and peace. Later, David remembers a previous promise he made with Jonathan, and he finds the remaining living descendants from the house of Saul to show them kindness. When David finds Mephibosheth, he brought him to his palace and gave him a place of honor at his table. So everything is looking good with David until we come to 2 Samuel chapter 11. During a war with the Ammonites, when kings were supposed to be fighting, David was at his palace. David sees Bathsheba, who was the wife of one of David's best friends named Uriah, bathing on her rooftop. So David forces her to come to his place so that he can sleep with her. He ends up impregnating her, so David decides to cover up his rape by bringing Uriah back home from battle. He assumes that when Uriah comes home, he will sleep with this wife, and Bathsheba's baby will assume to be Uriah's and not David's. The problem was that Uriah was a man of integrity and honor and could not get himself to go home because he didn't feel right enjoying his wife while his soldiers were fighting in a battle. In fact, it was a requirement for soldiers to abstain from sex during a holy war. So David tries another way. He invites Uriah to his place and starts to drink with him. But even when he was drunk, Uriah refuses to see his wife. So David starts to panic because people will eventually find out that he impregnated Bathsheba. And although as king he can do whatever he wants, David is afraid of having his future child, possibly the future king, viewed as illegitimate since he was conceived out of wedlock. So David talks to his general Joab and comes up with an evil plan. He tells him to place Uriah on the front line and to have the rest of the soldiers pull back so that he is by himself and killed in battle, which is exactly what happened. Although David was able to cover up his act, God knew and sent Nathan to rebuke David and to tell him that God would judge him by taking the life of the child inside Bathsheba. Later, Bathsheba becomes pregnant again, and this time she gives birth to a son who is named Solomon. Now David's oldest son, Amnon, pretends to be sick in order to seduce Tamar, his half-sister. When Tamar refused Amnon's advances, he raped her. This incident caused Absalom, Tamar's brother, to avenge his sister. Absalom waited 2 years and arranged for the murder of Amnon, then ran away. Absalom remained in exile for 3 years until Joab arranged for his return by making sure he would not be killed for killing Amnon. When Absalom returned, David refused to see him for 2 years until they were finally reconciled. During this time, David never disciplined Absalom, which allowed Absalom to conspire to take the throne from his father David. After 4 years, Absalom made himself king and gathered enough military strength to force David to flee from Jerusalem. Absalom's failure to chase David eventually led to his defeat and eventual death at the hands of Joab, David's main general. David mourned for his son Absalom and was able to return to Jerusalem and reestablish himself as king. David disciplined Joab for killing Absalom by replacing him as general with Amasa. Now things were a little unsettled after David's return to Jerusalem, so another rebellion happened to be led by Sheba. Joab kills Amasa, David's new general, and then pursues after Sheba and ended this revolt, leading to him being reinstated as a commander of Israel's army. Later, Israel experienced a 3-year famine, and it was revealed to David that God was judging Israel because Saul broke his peace treaty with the Gibeonites. To atone for Saul's sin, David gave 7 descendants of Saul to the Gibeonites for execution. Then, a war breaks out between Israel and the Philistines again. So we see 4 different heroic episodes of David's mighty men, referring to his top soldiers, defeating the Philistines. This leads to David writing a song of praise for the deliverance God provided for him, which becomes the words of Psalm chapter 18. The book ends with David deciding to take a census of his military, revealing that his trust is in his political power instead of God. This causes God to judge him by sending a plague that kills many people in Israel. In response, David builds an altar which later becomes the site of the temple, and God responds to David's sacrifice by stopping the plague. This concludes the narratives of David's reign and the book of 2 Samuel. Thank you to today's sponsor, On Reverence. They offer a free digital worship music app called Maskill. If you want to find out more, I'll leave some links below in the description box. If you missed the last video about the book of 1 Samuel, I'll leave a link here for you to watch. Until next time, see you!